You're listening to Product Biz Made Easy. This is episode 23, and today we're talking to Annie White Brown. I'm excited to have her on the show because she just came back from working a New York trade show and exhibiting her beautiful candle line. And you know what? It was a disaster. She came home with 0 orders. So we're dissecting what happened, going through the problems and mistakes that she made so that you won't make them. I hope you stick around.
Welcome to the Product Biz Made Easy podcast, where we help you scale your product-based business. Your award-winning host and serial entrepreneur, Becky J. Anderson, created an 8-figure product-based brand that was sold all over the world and in big box retail stores. Each week, she will be sharing sales strategies, marketing advice, or inspiring interviews to help you scale your product-based business. Now, on to the show.
Welcome back to the podcast, Annie.
Hi, Becky. Thanks for having me again.
Hey, we're so excited to have you on this episode. I think this is an episode everyone is going to be excited to hear all about. So for those people that are listening to the podcast that missed your previous episode, episode number 2, would you please tell us who you are and what you do?
So my name is Annie. My real, quote unquote, real name is Anya. I am the owner and maker at Natural Annie Essentials, where we create an all-natural line of soy candles and bath and body products. Started around 2014 after the birth of my first daughter, Tiffany. She is my inspiration behind all that I do now.
That's great. And for those of you that didn't hear episode 2 with Annie about how she quit her 9-to-5 and went into her business full time, that's a great episode. You should go back and hear it. But today we have Annie on because we're going to get down into the nitty gritty about real life and some of the ugly stuff that happens with running a product-based business. And she just did a trade show that, in her opinion, was a colossal flop because she came back with how many orders, Annie?
Absolutely 0.
0. And people don't hear the bad side of this. And these trade shows are so expensive to do. You're thousands and thousands of dollars into them. And so we are going to dissect the trade show that she just did and figure out what happened and what she could do different next time. Because, you know, this is near and dear to my heart because, truth be told, my very first trade show, I did 0. So I'm very sympathetic. And my second trade show, I did 0. And I just keep thinking, what if I would have quit? But I'll tell you, I remember the emotions so clearly like it was yesterday. So while Annie was at her show and texting me, oh my gosh, we're day 1, no orders. We're day 2, no orders. We're day 3, no orders. I'm going back to Dallas when I did my very first trade show. So I did my very first trade show and it was a colossal ice storm right the day the show opened. So no one showed up at the show. And in Dallas, they don't have stuff to clear the roads when it's ice storms. So the place shuts down. So I thought,
oh my God,
I'm going to give it a second shot. And I came back, and this is after crying on the plane the whole way home going, I'm going to go broke. I put so much money into this show. Then I thought, okay, I can't give up. I have to do another show. So I went out and did the New York Extract show, which was a bath and body show. And at the time I was in bath and body. And I did not write 1 order there. However, I did get a lot of contacts and I came home and followed up. And it ended up being a really good show because it was in the follow-up. So we're going to start from 0 with Annie and find out what happened with her 0 order experience.
Yeah.
So what show did you do, Annie?
So I did the Shop Object show out of New York. It's a fairly new show. I think it's their 3rd year during the show. And I'm only guessing that because it's called Shop Object 3.0.
Okay.
I'm thinking it's their 3rd year. So yeah, Shop Object in New York.
How does it differ from the gift show? Tell us that.
I think it has a different feel. Definitely has a different feel. I mean, even prior to committing to the show, I noticed that the vibe was a bit different because it was a decision between New York Now for me and Shopped Object. And I
Right.
really just liked the vibe of Shopped Object. And that's really why I kind of
Why you
went
picked
for that.
it.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. How many people attend that show? Do you have any idea in comparison to the New York Now show?
I don't have an exact number of the amount of people that attend, but I do know it is a much smaller show than the New York Now show. And again, New York Now has been around for years.
Right.
So Shop Object, they definitely had a smaller number, but what I kind of gathered from that show, it's more like a boutique style show, and the atmosphere for shopping is just a bit more relaxed, and it's more I don't know, I feel like it's more upscale and pretty, and just the environment is really cozy. And just by hearing shoppers walking through, they really liked that the show was like that. They liked that it was not too pushy. And these were words that I was hearing, while people were walking by. It's not too pushy, and it's cozy. So they did like that kind of vibe.
Yeah. So that's kind of what drew you into that. What made you want to experience that and have that be the show you attended? Okay. So for the listeners, tell us what you paid for the booth, because this is the part that gets really scary.
Oh, yeah. So the booth was around the 3,500, so about 3,500-ish, I believe, for the booth. Probably not exactly that, but very close to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not cheap to do. And then by the time you live in Connecticut, you had to go to New York. So by the time you put samples, loaded up all your stuff, printed catalogs, your time, you're into it about $5,000 at least.
Oh, yeah, easily. So it's all of that, including, and for me, I had to get all the fixtures for the booth. So you pay for the booth, which is pretty much a blank space. So now you have to make it your own. So, and I totally went overboard. Now I know this now. I went overboard with all the decorations and fixtures, and just I had way too much stuff. So yeah, about 5,000 would be about accurate.
Yeah. So when did you realize that this show was a flop?
You know what? I realized that like the first day.
Yeah.
The very first day, about midday, I said to my husband, okay, oh well, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
And I literally started panicking. So it was a total torture for me, because it was from day one through to the third day. It was just, I had that feeling, when you kind of had that feeling, you have that feeling where, this is not going to work.
Yeah. So let's go through some of the situations. Like, these are some of the questions I ask you on the text when you were going back and forth with me. What is the location where you are in the booth? Because location is just like retail. Location, location, location. And I have found if you're on a sidewall, or if you're back to the back, or if you're on one of those things as people go up and down the rows, if they miss you when they go through, depending on the layout, it can be colossally catastrophic.
Oh, yeah.
So where were you located on the floor?
And that's exactly where I was. I was on the side. So at the entrance, and a while back when I was just starting out in shows, I remember a very seasoned woman told me at a pop-up shop, and it was literally just like a community pop-up shop. She said, you never want to be to the left of the entrance, because no one wants to go. When people enter a building, they automatically go right.
They typically do.
They typically do. And the moment I showed up at that show and I got the map and I figured out where I was going, I was like, yeah, this is not good.
Yeah.
So I was to the left of the entrance, on a back wall. So this was not a prime.
That's even worse. A back wall to the left and a back wall. Yes.
Left and back wall. So that's a double.
Unless there's food or a bathroom on the way to that.
No, there was neither.
Yeah, because that's the path everybody will go to find lunch and to go to the bathroom. So yeah, 2 strikes right there.
Yeah. So
side and back.
And I felt that the moment I walked in, I'm like, yeah. And then also my neighbors, my neighboring vendors, they had nothing closely related to me. We were like on the total opposite ends of product wise that you would probably go into a store to shop for.
So you sell candles. What did your neighbors at the show sell?
I sold candles, and with my brand, I'm very vibrant. I'm very pretty and very colorful. My neighbors, they were all black and white. They were either black and white or blue and white. That was it.
Okay.
And they sold scarves. They sold clothing, mostly clothing.
Yeah.
And skateboards.
So here's a lesson for the listeners at home. When you're picking your location for a trade show, make sure that you're in the right section of the show where it's corresponding things. So as the buyers walk through, they're looking for all home decor if you're candles, or clothing if you're clothing, because the clothing people were probably in that corner of the store, and the clothing people don't want candles. No. Also, make sure that your location on the floor. Typically, a show will give you a map and they will let you know. You can find out who the vendors are around you. Typically, most shows will let you do that. I'm surprised this one didn't let you do that.
No, they did not, and I was not very happy about that. We literally got the map the day before the show, so there was no way to kind of say what your preference was really, and I still have to complete that feedback form, and I would
definitely do that. That's
one of the things I would definitely include on there. Let people know where they're going to be before the show. And I would say to the listeners,
or have a say, Annie, or have a say in where they are, because that is a decision on whether you want to do the show or not. So for me, I would not have paid $3,500 to be on the back left corner in the clothing section. So the fact that they didn't let you do that, whereas the New York Now show would have let you see the map.
And I think what they're doing with this show, they want it to be very different from New York Now, but I feel like certain aspect of it needs to kind of remain because it is very vital for the vendors.
Right.
You know? So yeah. And I would say, like, with regards to location, I know a lot of times, say I sell candles, and a lot of times candle makers, like if this was your first show, they don't necessarily like to be around or closely placed to other candle makers. But I feel like in this type of situation, you want to be placed next to other candle makers, because if the stores are shopping for candles, you're all in the same vicinity. I feel like they go to a particular section of the show for candles. And by the time they would probably reach to my area way in the back, they would have already bought all their candles. And keep in mind too, like, they're not just buying one brand of candles. So you may very well be in that mix.
Correct. My best shows, my Atlanta showroom was right across from Yankee, and it was great how much traffic I got from the Yankee traffic. So oftentimes candle vendors are afraid to be next to others, but you're right. It's not a bad thing. It's also not a bad thing to get to know and have relationships with your competitors.
Oh God, no, it's not. And I remembered I was just having this conversation this week too. When you're kind of just starting out, and I got shunned by other candle makers, mostly locally. They just don't want to be in connection, or they don't want to talk to each other because they just for fear of you're taking their customers. But that's not the case. Every brand is so different. It's a totally different experience. And I use this example all the time. I forgot where I saw it. Like, if you go to the supermarket and you're buying bread, there's not just one brand of bread. There's like
a lot.
So just look at it the same way. It's okay to talk to fellow candle makers.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I'm telling you, I had great relationships with my competitors, and I had a big order canceled right before Christmas one time. And I was able to call a competitor and they helped me move it. So if you build relationships with them, also if you run out of something and they have it and you can't get it from the supplier quick enough, oftentimes they'll help you. Hey, I ran out of wicks, or, I'm out of this, and they can help you with that. But so it's not a bad thing having relationships with them.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the setup of your show. This is another thing that you found was an issue at this show, so the listeners can learn from this so they don't make this mistake. Because you had never done this show before, you did not know that it's more of a modern setup and vibes. And like you said, really straight lines, minimalistic, black and white. You were set up with more of a country feel with the wooden hutches.
Oh, yeah.
Found very quickly that was kind of out of place at that show.
When I was setting up, I felt it. I was like, yeah, these shelves are not for the show. So I usually go all out for my booth, like decor. I do a lot of flowers and all that jazz. And this was not the show for that. And you notice like you're kind of out of place when everyone around you is just like simple. It's white walls, white shelves, product. That's it. All these flowers that I had going on, not necessary. All the stress I had going to get these flowers was totally not necessary. And people, I feel like the customers, they were just not used to it, and it was distracting.
Yeah.
Halfway through the show, I realized I was distracted.
So all of those flowers and all of that fluff are great for craft fairs and for the local, where they buy the cash and carry.
Mm-hmm.
For a wholesale trade show, the buyers are walking by and you have about 8 seconds for them to know who you are, what you do, and why they need it.
Oh, yeah.
And so less is more. You just have your display and your signs. You want them to know who you are, and then just tell them very quickly who you are, what you do, and why they need it in those signs and with your setup.
Yeah.
So
it's a totally. It's a totally different audience. And I feel like I kind of went into this because I've done a ton of craft shows. I've done the pop-up shops. It's what I'm familiar with. And, customers like cash and carry, they love the pretty decor. They love the pretty booth. But you have to realize, like with these trade shows, these are people, this is work for them. So they're just there to get what they need and get out. They're not there looking around because they have a free day or an extra day. They want to just hang out at a show. This is work, and they just want to get right to it.
That's a very good point, because you're 100% correct. The buyers there, they are on the job. They're not there to play and have fun. Whereas the craft fairs, it's people there to buy gifts, buy things for themselves, see what's there, be casual. Yeah. So very, very true. And so good point for the listeners to understand that too. Was this your very first wholesale trade show?
Well, this was my second. The very first one I didn't even count that because that was also a flop. And I feel like it wasn't I didn't do as bad at the first show. I learned a lot. And, but I felt like that show was not marketed right. And it wasn't a good show. And they no longer have that show, which is it's a good thing. Yeah. But this is my second one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next thing, how your booth was set up. We know you had the wrong kind of hutches, but then one of the things I noticed when Annie was having her meltdown, I said, take lots of pictures of your booth so I can see it and we can look and see if it's set up correctly. And then also some competitors so you can compare. Now, you were in a 10 by 10 booth and you had your hutches set up in a U shape.
It was actually a 8 by 4.
Okay, so smaller than the 10 by 10, but basically the square. So you had your hutches set up in the U shape. One of the things I found on these temporary wholesale shows, if they have to walk into your booth, if they are unsure, they won't do it.
Yeah.
So it's oftentimes very good to have a hutch up front or to have a table up front with a point of purchase display on it. So as they walk by, they can see, oh, this has got something I want to see. And then they walk into the booth.
And something that you had also mentioned, which after you mentioned it, that's all I could see all day. And I wish I could just rip it out. The carpet. I had carpeting, and I feel like no one wanted to step on the carpet. It was almost like they were intruding on my space. Like I had to literally say, it's okay. You can come on in.
Yeah.
And they don't really want to do that. You have to make it open where they just walk in if they wanted to. But I feel like that carpet was a barrier to the booth.
What did the other vendors have on the floor?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
So did you pay for carpet, or they paid to put something on top of the carpet?
No, I had mine, so I brought my own. I thought it was being.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
But for a regular pop-up show, a carpet is really necessary. Like people love that.
It's inviting. Totally. But then again, that's cash and carry, a different customer. You're right. You're right. So you live and learn by doing it. You make it easy and inviting. One of the other things that I noticed in your pictures, you had the hutches, but you had quite a bit of space behind you, between your candles. So one of the things that I was telling you, and we want to tell the listeners, the wholesale buyers, especially the bigger buyers, and even the smaller ones, they're paying big rent for their stores. And so they're paying sales per square inch, not sales per square foot. Product. So they want things to look like they would look in their store. So you want to display it like it would look in their store. And those candles would be next to each other as close as can be, and more behind them, so that there's a whole lot there for the customer to look at and make choices.
Yeah.
So that would be one of the other things. The other thing that I suggested to Annie is to have some small point of purchase programs or displays, because then it's easier for the customer to say, oh, this $300 display, I get it, and it comes with this many. So now it becomes a program, or a POP, which stands for point of purchase display, where the customer can buy it. And one of the things I had the most success with is I had a little wooden hutch for the home baked candle line, and it was like a $200 buy-in or $180 buy-in, something like that. They got the hutch free. So then you have real estate in their store.
Yeah.
But, you can do all sorts of different ones, wrought iron, or even the small IKEA hutches where they have something. There's a display for the store, but I would next time put together a bunch of little programs. So like, for example, in ours, I showed Annie pictures of our showroom. We'd have like a birthday cake POP, and then we'd have home baked candles, and then we would have the gardener candles. So everything that we had, all these different lines that were segmented, were in different little programs. So there was all sorts of opportunities for them to buy in and buy a program. And then it becomes easy. You take the decision away from the buyer. It's like, oh my gosh, you're making it so easy for me. These are all our top sellers in this line, in this category. And I can just envision where that would fit in my store.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Yep, it totally does. And for shows like these, where if you're starting, if you're doing your very first trade show, because what I did was go for the cheapest booth, which is not even really cheap, and it's not a lot of space. So even if you don't have that space, I feel like pictures would really work well. Pictures of that program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the cheapest space isn't always the best. I know they say in retail, location. When I was deciding on my first retail store, I spent days sitting at the mall watching, because I was thinking about going down one of the aisles, but because it was like half the price, the rent. In fact, it was less than half the price of the main entryway. But then I started counting sacks and watching how many people were carrying sacks out of those aisles versus straight. And so I went for the more expensive booth, or the more expensive store.
Yeah.
Put it in the main walkway. And it was a gamble that paid off, because my store did very well because of that. And then the spot I was looking at down the aisle, in the 10 years I had my lease in the mall, that store turned over 3 times.
Wow.
So location is everything. We can't enough as you're looking at doing trade shows make sure that you get the map where you can look and decide. So one thing, Annie, you've graduated from the School of Hard Knocks, and you can't give up, because I had 2 colossal flops and ended up building a $25 million business. The shows are how you build the wholesale side of the business.
Yeah.
My hat's off to you that you're open to sharing your experience with those so they can learn from it and not make the same mistakes. And then you're already looking forward to doing another show.
Oh, yeah.
You know what you would do next time, and you're halfway there. But one good thing came out of the show. You did get interest from a big key account.
Mm-hmm. I got a few interests, and one of them was what was your name again? I'm forgetting the name right now. Uncommon Goods. Yep. And that was pretty much really the highlight of my entire show. So a few of their reps had passed through earlier, and then the founder, but I later found out he was the founder. He had passed by too, and he was pretty interested in what we were carrying. And he actually stayed there the longest of, I feel like, everyone throughout that entire 3 days. So he was pretty interested. And then later, the buyer from the Canada department had stopped by. So that was pretty great. So I'm still working. I'm still in talks with them as to what they would like to do.
See, so you never know. So back to my example with my 0 sales at the New York show, I had cards of buyers like that. Mm-hmm. I came back and followed up. And one beautiful thing about getting the name of a big buyer, you can keep following up because they buy not only for their everyday inline programs, but they buy for seasonal programs. So now you can ping in every season, and as well as when they would buy their typical January and July buying cycles. Yeah. So you follow up. So mine ended up good because those cards I got lots of orders after I got home and followed up. So it ended up paying for it. So just because your show is a flop when you're coming home after the show doesn't necessarily mean it will end up that way, because sometimes those contacts you get are just gold in the end. So I'm excited for you for that, because it could end up being really good for you. And
you wouldn't have gotten those leads otherwise, I feel like. I mean, because it's so hard getting the contacts of these buyers for the stores that you really want to get into. So I feel like even if you don't get a sale, just that alone in itself is worthwhile.
Right. Let me give you a little tip that worked for me over the years. Every time I got one of those cards of the big buyers, I would stay in touch with them and continually pitch, probably half a dozen or more times per year. You can't pitch too much because they buy a lot. But one of the things that I did going forward, every time I was doing a big show, whether it be Atlanta or Las Vegas or New York or one of the big shows, we emailed every buyer that we had cards for, and we sent a postcard. So 2 things. And we just want to invite you to this show we are going to be exhibiting at. And here's our booth number. And here's the days we'll be there. Can we make an appointment with you, or just feel free to stop in? We will be there. And you know what? That paid off for us big time. And it got to the point where at the end, before I sold my business, those last probably 5 years, we were booked back to back, hour by hour, with appointments with the big box retailers because we took that time. Yeah. So that goes to show you that card, that name of that buyer, and the fact that you got more than one buyer from that same place. They're highly interested, and this could be a huge payoff for you.
Yeah. Yep.
Super excited for you.
Me too.
So grateful for you, Annie, for sharing your experience. It's not always easy to come on and share the ugly side of business, but you are so authentic, and I am so proud of you for doing that and being willing to share with the listeners, because there's a lot of people that are wanting to do these wholesale shows.
And I'll tell them it's not easy, but unless you take that leap, you'll never really and truly know what it will be like for your business. When I tell you, I was calling Becky and I was texting Becky the entire week, and I'm like, oh my God. I had all the time I was there, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to go bankrupt. And I remember even that very day, I think it was like the Sunday, I finally, like, I just broke down and I cried from New York to Connecticut. It was an hour and a half ride and I cried all the way through. And I'm like, this is rough. This is rough. But you know what? I got it out of my system. That was my way of getting it out of my system. And a few days later, my husband said, would you do this again? I'm like, heck yes.
But not that show again. Or if you did that show, you would do it different.
Very different.
Right.
Very different. Yeah.
Well, you're a risk taker. You left your 9 to 5 to do this business. And so you will be a risk taker. You know what?
Yeah.
Remember that cartoon where the little guy is digging through the mountain and then he quits right before he's there and you can see it and he's like an inch away from breaking through to get through the tunnel.
Yeah.
It's so many people quit and you are not going to quit. You've come too far in your business.
Yeah.
You're doing great otherwise, but it's a setback definitely financially, but it's one of those lessons that you say you've graduated from the School of Hard Knocks. You don't go back for the master's or the PhD. Learned, got it. Now I know my next show is going to be a colossal success, not a mistake, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Yes, you've got it. You're there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Annie. You're a sweetheart, and we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me again, Becky.
All right. We'll see you again later.
All righty. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to Product Biz Made Easy podcast. Now, don't forget to hop on over to BeckyJAnderson.com and grab your free strategy roadmap, as well as check out all the resources and things that there are over there to help you grow your product-based business. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.